Alrighty, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Maddie Wagner, and I am the Digital Marketing Specialist with Johnson Consulting Group. We greatly appreciate your attendance to JCG's first ever panel webinar. We are extremely excited to showcase experts of the industry and to discuss data-driven decisions. Today, we have Beth Kimmick, Executive Vice President of Trust Administration at ClearPoint Federal Bank at Bank and Trust, moderating today's event. And for our panelists, we have Nelson Thulin, Director of Business Consulting Services at JCG, Nick Timpe, CEO of webCemeteries, and Ashlee Theising, President of ClearPoint Federal Bank and Trust. Just as a reminder, feel free to type questions into the chat box on your control panel during the discussion. We'll try to answer as many questions as we can throughout the event. And with that, Beth, take it away.
Thank you so much, Maddie. I appreciate it. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We're really excited to talk to you about this topic, which I know when you think data-driven decisions, like, are you really excited about it? But we are. And so in case you're not familiar with what data-driven decision-making is, the definition is that it's a process of making organizational decisions based on actual data rather than intuition or observation alone. So sounds pretty, self-explanatory, but there's a lot more to it. And it's really important to know some statistics before we get started. Did you know that 6 out of 10 companies make the majority of their decisions based on gut feelings and intuition alone and not based on actual data and numbers? But what we've learned and what all the statistics show is that companies who decide to actually use data to make their decisions have 6% higher profits than companies who choose to go on gut and intuition alone. So it's really important to use a lot of different aspects of your business to use data. So today we have these 3 panelists with us, and we've chosen Nick and Nelson and Ashlee as experts in this particular topic because all 3 of them work with companies that work with their clients on different aspects of their data. So it's all different pieces that can help you in different ways. We wanted to bring everyone together to get different perspectives and talk about data-driven decisions. So my first question today is actually first going to go to Nelson. So the question that I want to start with is, Nelson, tell us a little bit about what does it mean to you to make data-based decisions?
Well, thank you. I think in a word, confidence. There's so many decisions that funeral home cemetery owner needs to make, even from the type of products that they're going to present, whether it's caskets, urns, vaults, prayer cards, just a variety of things that is a choice of families that you have to have some intuition as to what they're going to like or what they would be more inclined to purchase. There's also the decisions of expanding your business. Do I go into a new community? Do I go into competition with somebody providing a different service? Those are big, big decisions. And the fact of the matter is, until you do it, you're never going to know the exact answer. But the data that you can look at, demographics, trends in the market, getting information from other vendors who track things like colors of caskets and things like that, you can take information and make your best decision based on that. And again, you're going to make it with a higher degree of confidence, knowing that at least you put the effort into making that decision.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's helping people to feel more comfortable with what they're going to do. Nick, what are your thoughts on the topic?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think just to echo what Nelson was saying, there's really a lot of proactivity that's required in making data-driven decisions. Often an idea can sound good, and you really alluded to this, Beth, when you opened up with the statistics that you provided. An idea can sound great, but until time and money's been put into it, you don't know whether it's going to pan out. But our businesses today, cemetery, funeral home, vendor, consultant, we have access to immense amounts of information, even inside of our own organizations, to be making, intelligent, informed decisions that are going to have a much higher degree or probability for success. But there has to be a proactive element to that, to be tracking that information in advance so that we can actually have it when we need it. Because oftentimes you don't even know the decision that you're going to have to make until it's right in front of you. And at that point, it can be too late to gather the data. So to me, making a data-driven decision is really all around having a proactive plan for what data is going to be collected and captured and tracked, and then having a process for how to do that, and a way also of keeping that data consistent and high quality all the way through to make sure that it's reliable, when it's needed. But I think for our profession in particular, we need to make sure we're going into that with an open mind as we're looking at our businesses and the type of information that we're collecting and tracking or gathering from third parties, because really every aspect of the business can benefit from data tracking. So some of the clear ones that come to mind, I think, would be like finance and sales and marketing. But even from an operational standpoint, you've got the ability to track things like work tickets, or, how did we do on setting up for the service, or different things like that, where, tracking information internally, providing benchmarks and providing accountability and rewarding success of employees who are doing internal operations can make a huge difference as well. So every aspect of the business can benefit, but I think one of the key underlying elements is just having that proactive plan for what's going to be tracked and how that's going to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of the words now are proactive, confidence. Ashlee, what would you add to that on what a database decision is?
I think the only thing I would add is that making your decisions based on data does allow you to continually make sure you're on the right path. So it helps to keep you in line and make sure as things change in your business, whether it's intentional or unintentional, external changes, that you're able to see what's actually happening maybe before it's too late, so that you can continue to make changes and evolve as your business grows and the environment you're in changes.
Absolutely. So now you've got some thoughts, some thought starters, it helps you be more proactive, more confident, and makes you more able to adapt as things change. As we're looking at, how people are using data, Nick, can you give us an example of how you've used data to assist a client, or how you help clients use their data to make decisions?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. There's really I guess probably two examples that would come top of mind. So when I was thinking about this in advance, two things kind of jumped out. So I'll stick with those. Our company provides software for cemeteries to be able to do two things. So there's an example on either side. The first is internal record keeping and tracking inventory, what properties available, what properties sold, sales contracts, work tickets, things like that. So on that side of our area of focus, the work orders really came to mind when I was thinking about making data-driven decisions. And that's an area that I think sometimes often can get a little bit overlooked when it comes to that proactivity and making data-driven decisions, because oftentimes work orders are tracked on paper, and you lose a lot of ability to have transparency into what work is being done, how different employees are doing. So a couple areas where we've seen a lot of benefit gained in the decision-making ability is when you can attach a work order, and I don't necessarily only mean like a customer complaint. It could also be, the opening of a grave or preparation for a service, but attaching any kind of work ticket to a location in the cemetery, to the customer that requested it, to the employee that it's assigned to, then gives you the ability to report on all of those details. So then you now have the ability to know, is there a particular employee that needs to be retrained on how to meet timelines or complete tasks in an acceptable way. When it's all on paper, it's really hard to get that visibility. Over a long period of time, you can kind of see trends, but it's a lot easier on, when it's all digital and tracked in that way. You can also more easily tell what employees need to be recognized for the work that they're doing. One employee might be doing a particular type of job in half the time of everyone else, and it's worth calling that out and even going and asking, why is this working well for you? What are you doing differently than everyone else? So we've seen some really good success in that area. Also in a similar regard, uncovering areas of the cemetery that might need attention or focus. if you're attaching every work ticket to a location in the cemetery, over time you can notice patterns that, it looks like about a third of all of the headstones that we're leveling and raising are in this one area of the cemetery. Maybe we need to go look at the groundwater levels or something like that, or where the water is running off in that area, and just uncover, different things of that nature that when it's on paper, you don't really have that visibility into those types of things. But of course, probably the best example of that, and kind of most positive example of that, is just having better transparency and visibility. Just again, facilitates a better process and culture of responding to those work tickets, or whatever the area of focus is. It doesn't have to be operations, but when everyone's held accountable and has the transparency, you can have great successes. Like there was a customer recently that reported to us that in fulfilling a work ticket of a customer complaint, they actually turned that into a $60,000 estate sale, because the client came back to see the work. They were happy with what was done, and they ended up wanting to buy more property nearby since it was available for their family. So, having that transparency and culture that's created around the transparency and visibility is really, really key and critical. I was going to talk about another area, but I don't want to take too much time. There's a lot of benefit gained of tracking like marketing and website data as well, to be able to engage customers and increase online conversions. But I don't want to steal time from Nelson or Ashlee. So
yeah, no, that's really great, Nick. And if you think about it, I mean, very specific examples of how just knowing information about work orders can change how you manage your employees. I know, Nelson, you have a lot of ways that you're dealing with customers. So what are some ways that you have assisted customers to use data, maybe from, an accounting or sales side, or the ways that Johnson works with people?
Yeah, I'm like Nick. The ideas and thoughts are piling up, kind of the geek squad here of number crunching. But I would say the most important thing that we help clients do is create their budget. You don't know if you're winning or losing unless you're keeping score. And so many people will say things to us, well, we're doing more calls, but there's less money, or we made more money over the course of the year, but it doesn't reflect in my checking account. And because what we're not always doing is measuring the income and the outflow of expenses and things like that. That's the biggest thing that we can do to help most clients, is just help them on a budget that they can manage and plan for. In a more specific example, just this last year with COVID, March 15th came along and the CDC then shut down funerals at initially 50 people, and then it was down to 10. And anyone out there knew that the landscape of providing funeral service was changing, because you weren't going to have a public visitation. You weren't going to have essentially a traditional funeral, which in the funeral service world is the biggest revenue generator per case type. And there was a lot of panic that went into that. And fortunately, for the clients that we had that were on our performance tracker, we track their case type and their sales average. And we could look at that time, we were looking at 3 months out and saying that if your traditional services now by law are going to be converted into a graveside service or some minimal type service, we can project out now what your loss in revenue is going to be. And in a happy turn, it turned out that for most people, when they could see that that was a manageable number, we then turned to their expenses and adjusted for that. But I know so many people were coming to us, really afraid that they were going to have to let people go. And in the world of funeral service, for everybody out there, they know just how difficult it is to find quality people and contemplate the fact that you might have to let some people go. That was very disconcerting. So when we were able to say, we're estimating probably a 9% drop in revenue, but we can help you manage that in the way of other expense reduction, not that we have to start cutting staff. So That's mine. I'll restrain myself.
Yeah, I mean, that makes so much sense. It takes the fear out of what you could potentially be facing if you have the numbers and you can make a plan with that data. So I think that it speaks so highly for having data and understanding what the data means. There's so much data that's available today. Nick, with everything that's available, people often find themselves just completely overwhelmed. They don't even know where to start. What advice do you give your clients on where to start?
Sure. Yeah. When I was thinking about that question, what really stuck out to me is a lot of times what I see isn't that people are overwhelmed as much by the quantity of data, but really stuck on the quality of the data that they have, and is it really usable to them? And especially in the world that we're living in, where we're helping people, running a cemetery or a funeral home, looking at property inventory levels, or marketing data from their website, or client lists in the CRM, different things like that. And the quality of the data is really going to dictate what you can do with it. And it kind of like, math and science fields say garbage in, garbage out. So you want to make sure you have something quality to work with when you have it. And at that point, then it becomes a lot easier to narrow down on what you need to focus on and what data you can use for a given question that's in front of you. So I think that's really the key to being able to use the appropriate data when the time comes, is make sure that the data is quality. Like I mentioned earlier, the proactivity of having a plan in place of what you're going to track, how you're going to track it, and how you're going to keep it high quality. And particularly, when it comes to a cemetery and you're looking at, the problem and challenge of multiple generations of people who have kept the records and kept the maps and have, 3 or 4 different sets of information tracked in parallel, oftentimes that can be what actually stops someone or stops a firm from bringing everything online into a digital environment where you can access that gold mine of information. Usually it's just this perceived insurmountable obstacle, to getting everything in there. And that can be a reality, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the reality. I don't think it's as much, what tool can I get to get all the right number of Excel dumps, or do I have to sit there and, manually enter all the records from the past 150 years? There are ways and strategies of getting that information into the computer. Particularly what we've seen is, I guess our firm over the past 15 years, we've developed a process for forcing a reconciliation between the map information and the paper record information, and really matching those up together in a database. And there's a way that can be done in an accurate and an efficient and also an affordable fashion, without bogging the internal staff down and taking them away from serving families. So I think that's, to me, the key, is making sure that the information is accurate and reliable, when you need it, and then it's clear which information you would need to go to.
So it sounds like the most useful thing is to make sure that you've got, like you said, that your data is quality, and then you can make some assumptions in areas. If you're working with someone who has built kind of a program, you can make assumptions, and there may be pieces that it's okay that you don't have the quantity, but you've got the quality. And that's what really matters.
Absolutely. Like, for example, we've worked with some firms to try to determine, what percentage of the cremation market are we capturing locally in our market area. And you can very easily know, how to get that if you've tracked over the years, the type of burial when you're conducting a burial. Is this a cremation burial? Is it a standard vault and casket burial? Is it an infant burial? If you haven't tracked that, you're guessing, at least if you're going back further than your memory can provide, and then relying on your memory isn't always the best when it comes to data analytics in the first place. So, just making sure that you're tracking the right information in the right manner so that it's there and reliable for you. Because having it on paper, again, is not going to give you the ability to run a report and say, okay, we've got 30% of our burials are cremation, but the local market has a 60% cremation rate. So there's clearly a market opportunity that we're missing. We want to fine tune our digital marketing or our print marketing to capture that area, those types of things. So making sure that it's reportable. And then even there, making sure that not only are we capturing it, but are we capturing it in a standardized way so we can run a report, depending on whatever system's being used. You could track that type of information in any of a number of ways. putting it into a comment field, for example, you're never going to get to run a report off of that. So even though it's captured, you're not going to be able to use that data. So that there's those types of considerations that would go into making sure, because I think oftentimes when you're trying to make a decision, it can be pretty clear what information you need. The bigger question is, do you have it, or is it reliable? So that's the point that I was going after.
Yep, absolutely.
And Jen,
yeah.
Just to add on to that, I do think that another piece is really evaluating what data are you paying for. Odds are you're paying a provider or for a system, or you're paying someone to do something, and do you have access to the data? So if you're using a system, can you get the data out? So if you're paying somebody to enter it, making sure that whoever you're paying for that service is able to help you understand how you can utilize it. Because I would guess that most every firm out there is paying for a lot of data that they don't have access to or they don't know how to get to and use. So just something else in terms of starting.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So, we've talked a lot about, where you start, what kind of data to have. And, once we look at it, you hear often people say that comparison is the thief of joy, but with data, benchmarking can be a very valuable tool. So creating a way to compare yourself to someone else. Ashlee, how have you used comparisons to assist your clients with managing their businesses?
Sure. So at ClearPoint, on a monthly basis, we take a look at new business, active contract, distribution metrics, kind of across all of our customer base. So 100,000 or so contracts that were active on a regular basis, 1,200 rooftops. And so we create some different metrics that we provide to our customers in our regular meetings with them in order to give them some guideposts so they can see how they either are like the other firms like them, or maybe how they're not. And we find that it's a powerful tool for highlighting some differences. Some are conscious decisions of ways that they want to approach their business that maybe isn't the norm in their area, and what changes they could make, how their decisions could impact their overall pre-need trust business. But we find that those statistics prompt a lot of good conversation, good questions, and often lead to maybe digging in a little deeper or identifying some other items that they may want to explore or experiment with to see how they want to frame their business, either in their market, in their state, kind of more globally, what they're looking at to determine how they're performing.
Absolutely. And there's so many different ways that people can look at any aspect of their data in the funeral and cemetery industry and get information that can help them, move forward in different areas. In addition to that, all three of you work in organizations where you're using data as part of your organization, part of how it's run and how it's managed. Nelson, can you give us an example of how Johnson Consulting uses data to drive decisions that it makes?
Yes, probably two of the biggest things that we see in our survey programs is the initial contact. Then those are the surveys written or filled out by the families that have been served. And when they reflect back on their full funeral experience, from the first call till the hugs at the graveside, they remark a lot about that first initial call was not on par with what the rest of the services are. It's a nationwide similarity with almost everybody. Data that you look at is that initial call is a struggle for a lot of people. And when we see that, of course, what we put into play then was a program that we offer up like a mystery shopping. So it's a 100-point evaluation of every call. We can get that down to location. If you're a larger firm and you're comparing the productivity or the sensibility of what your client's needs are, you can see that if it changes from location to location and right down to the individuals. That's a big part of what we see coming out of that. Interesting item too, I always kind of preach about the single question that had the biggest drop in 2020 was attention to detail. And in the course of my interactions with clients. We do monthly meetings where we discuss not only the data that we're getting back, but all their, various cares and concerns. But that's something that I pointed out to everybody. We can all justify it or probably make excuses for it, and that, we're 30% up on call volume. We've had shortages because people were quarantined, or some people just left our employment altogether. There's a lot of rationale for why attention to detail may have faltered in 2020, but that's not going to make the blow any more tragic for your business if there's an ID issue or lost jewelry or something that is damages your firm's reputation due to details and not watching that. So we proactively tell people, make sure that we're watching that and looking at every detail that goes into providing a service, so that you're not found somewhere in court trying to justify your actions.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm hearing you say that like even Johnson as a business, from working with its clients, has altered what you offer to clients in order to, based on the data that you've received. So your services have changed over time because you're tracking data, you're looking at the data, you're using it and reacting. Ashlee, at ClearPoint, how does ClearPoint, can you give examples of how ClearPoint uses data in our business as well?
Sure. And at ClearPoint, we actually spend a lot of time monthly looking at all of our internal data. So how are we performing, whether it's operationally, financially, what type of feedback are we getting from customers, how are we doing on sales? And we pull all this together with our management team, and we meet once a month. We look over all of the different metrics that we've pulled together, really to try to see how are we doing. We have a gut instinct of what we're doing, but what is the data showing? And often it can show you things before they're a problem or highlight inefficiencies. So to Nick's point, do you notice that suddenly this process is taking twice as long as it used to? What happened? Or we implemented what we thought was a process improvement, but we're not getting any more things done. So we spend a lot of time each month as a management team kind of evaluating how are we doing? What do we need to focus on? Are we seeing a lot of issues with this? Are we having a lot of customer issues? Maybe we need to retrain our customers or provide them more information because they're not understanding the process. Is there something that we could do better to help make it easier for them to do their primary business? So we spend a lot of time digging into data, evaluating it. And like I said earlier, really kind of continually asking the question of what now, because it's not just a point in time, it's not a one-time exercise, it's an evolution of how things are changing, how our business is growing, how our customers are changing, and what is the data of our business really telling us about where we should go next.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we have answered a lot of questions, and just some highlights of the things that we've gone over so far. Having data helps you be more proactive. It gives you confidence. It helps you be more adaptable. It can help with you being more prepared and to change other things. It does look like we do have a question before I get to our last question from Ted. Sorry, Ted. I know Nelson can pronounce your last name better than I can. Put you on the spot. So Ted asked, we have an enormous amount of data on our own customers, but where does he find data on competitors and their customers, and how do they find data that helps determine who their future customers are going to be? I don't know if one of the panelists wants to go first to answer that question.
Well, hi, Ted. People's information is confidential. It would be difficult, I think, for anybody to accurately summarize or specifically find out details about their competitor, but there are things that you can see high level. You can anticipate based on demographics and calculate what their potential market share is. We do that a lot of times when we look at feasibility. We'll look at the market share that a person has, or if they're entering into a market, what is the probability that they can draw in some of that market share from existing. We then can benchmark it. We talked about that earlier. We've got very powerful benchmarking tools with Johnson Consulting, just because of the billions, and that's with a B, deals that we help broker in funeral service. In every deal that we do, there's a deep dive into all the individual metrics. And so we've got that, and we make that available to the world so that you can then say, well, if a person was generating this kind of revenue because you estimate it's $5,000 per call, and your best guess is that your competitor does 300 calls. If you apply these metrics and say 35% of that is probably payroll, and then you divide that into how many people there, you could start to come up with some very generalized ideas about, oh, my competitor is probably putting together a compensation package of, you know, $75,000 to $80,000 for their employees. So you could look at that from the standpoint of just being competitive in the hiring marketplace. And there's all different angles depending upon what your question is, but it takes a little bit of navigating. You're never going to find the specific answer, but you can, zero in on it pretty good. I hope that helped.
I can jump in a little bit on that one too. I don't have a silver bullet for it, but it's good to know that you're online here, Ted. We can't see you, but thanks for being here. So a couple of ideas that come to mind just with some conversations I've had with customers over the years and how they're approaching that exact question that you're asking. In terms of trying to predict future customers, we have seen some cemeteries and funeral homes go ahead and create focus groups to do research on what different consumers in their market area are interested in. And it's obviously not a perfect solution, but trying to do a focus group on like a younger generation of what their interests are and what their experience has been with our profession can be helpful. Obviously, their perception will change maybe by the time they get to the point of purchasing, but it's at least instructive in the direction that they're heading at their point in life. So those focus groups can be helpful in providing really insightful information specific to a market area, because different areas of the country clearly have different buying preferences and different needs and things like that. In terms of getting data on competitors' customers and families, that can definitely be tricky, but a couple things that I've seen people do with success, and probably a lot on this call are doing it, but monitoring the newspaper and the obits to glean what families are being served by other firms, because that information is oftentimes published in the obituary, and then aggregating that into, again, a standardized format so you can be running reports on even looking at how many calls did we do here at our firm versus the one down the street, and how's that trending over time. That can be really helpful and effective. But another thing, and this is more of an anonymized set of information that can be generated, but with online marketing today, you can also geofence different areas. So we've even seen some of our customers geofence a competitor cemetery so that when someone drives through that cemetery, when they go back to their computer or their phone, they're going to see online ads about your cemetery. And that can be helpful, because presumably they're driving through for a reason. It might be that they're visiting a loved one, or it might be that they're there for a planning meeting, and getting your name and face in front of them can be helpful. But once they're on your website or have seen your ad, you have the ability then to start gathering and aggregating some anonymized information. You won't get information that Nick Timpe specifically went to your cremation page and looked at your cremation garden options, but what Google and Facebook can do through the technology that you embed into your website is start learning through algorithms of what type of person is going to have an interest in purchasing services from you or filling out the contact form on your website. Because you can basically set triggers of, okay, I want my visitor to perform this action, whether the action is buying something in your e-commerce store, like ordering a Christmas floral arrangement to be delivered to the graveside, or filling out the contact form on your pre-planning page on the site, whatever it might be. You tell the program what the action is that you deem to be success, and then they will start learning over time the type of people that you need to render ads to to maximize the likelihood of actually converting those visitors. So there's a lot you can, learn about your competitor families in your market area and your consumers in that regard as well. When it comes to really focusing in your marketing dollars, but having a strategy behind that, and the knowing how to use that technology is really critical, and having a website that's built to guide users to the right places and the right calls to action is really critical in that regard as well. So,
if I may, Nick, you touched upon something that's really, really a good suggestion, and that's study groups or focus groups. I know we help a lot of groups when they get together. They're looking for a centralized repository to get all their information to, that will also maintain that confidentially and provide them some comparisons. We do that quite often, not only for individual study groups, but also for some of the larger associations. We provide that service. So that's a really, really good approach.
So we actually have another question. So, we're talking a lot about the different types of data, and, you have to make sure it's quality. You have to have it electronically so that you can get reports. Ashlee mentioned being able to get it back out of the system. So Joanna is asking, does anyone on the panel have a favorite or recommended software solution for streamlining accounting, inventory, sales, and CSR into a cohesive presentation so that you can measure and track goals? So it sounds like a lot of different pieces. So I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that question.
Well, it seems a little self-serving. I won't mention Johnson Consulting, but I think in anything that you're looking at, all these different programs have a specialty that they do, and everybody is trying to be the full solution. And I think I can honestly say that nobody has probably created nirvana yet when it comes to full scale, all-inclusive data collection, as well as all the other bells and whistles that you'd want to have. So I think there again, it's like we tell families that come into funeral homes, right? Shop around and make sure that you have a consistent list of questions of what your priorities are. I've seen a lot of funeral homes that their priorities are in one particular direction. They may want something that to them, the ability to schedule and coordinate services internally is a huge item. When you have multiple locations and you're sharing a lot of personnel, probably not the case with a smaller firm where, every morning over a cup of coffee, they sort out the service schedule. So again, go into every conversation with your own set of questions. Don't just sit back and have a pitch delivered. Ask specifically what you have most in mind for the operation of your business, and then just keep a tally. They do it well, they don't do it so well, and you'll just have to, the full comparison. It'll be a data-driven decision for sure. That'll help you make that good decision for you specifically.
I agree with what you said, Nelson, especially that every firm and every provider is going to take a different approach and have a different specialty. A lot of firms do try to do all of it, and obviously no one can do everything well or the best. So jack of all trades, master of none type of thing. So every organization is going to have their focus, and it's probably helpful when you're shopping to ask, what is your focus? What's the one thing that your firm or your platform is going to do better than anyone else does? And see how that lines up with your priorities. Because realistically, internally, there's going to be a priority, like Nelson mentioned, of what's most important to be able to track. And you shouldn't be handcuffed to not be able to track something with the platform that you're selecting, but knowing the prioritization and specialization is really key and important. And also, what the solutions are that could be put together to create that more complete package. Like Using our own firm as an example, like we really focus on applying technology to provide a better experience to the family that's being served at the cemetery. So we really focus on the workflow and the process behind, how you're writing a sales contract or how you're creating and tracking a work order. And we have internal reporting, which is actually getting added to later this year. But when it comes to the real detailed reporting, especially on the accounting side, our clients will actually download the data and then take it over to a firm like ClearPoint, where they can get, specialized reporting to their firm that was made, when their account was set up, and provides all the insights and details that they need. So there's ways of augmenting and complementing across vendors and platforms as well, without really providing restrictions at that same time.
Yeah,
Another excellent point there. For those of us old enough to remember the computer wars of the 80s and things like that, that was an objective, to make whatever you were providing only accessible and only manageable on your platform. And there's probably a little bit of that goes on out there right now, but big question to ask is compatibility. Nobody wants to change something that they've already spent 10 years using just to get another feature. So that's a big question. Really good point to make, Nick.
I would agree.
All right, well, we don't have any more questions right now from the audience. So the last question for the panelists, and I'm going to start with Nick. What we really want to do, so we've given the attendees a lot of information on how they can use data and how it can help them. And it's a big world, the world of data. So what's one thing that you would say that, the attendees could take away today and they could do today just to get started on making database decisions?
Absolutely. Yeah, as I was thinking about that, I really think the most important thing is every firm has some sort of technology available to them today, right now, for tracking data and information in the various departments that are there in the firm. So my advice would be just use that technology, whatever it is. It can be changed and updated later, but start tracking the information, have a plan, keep it clean, and keep it standard. I think that would be the main thing I would recommend.
All right, Ashlee, what do you think about that? What would you recommend people do today?
Yeah, along those same lines, I think, start by just taking an inventory and really be thoughtful and thinking about all the maybe non-traditional places where you have data, all the information that you have today. What are you capturing? What questions does that prompt? So if you pull all your data together and it's like, wow, we don't track cremation. That seems like a big question that you'd want to figure out a way to start tracking. So just starting with the inventory, what do I have now that I can use? What questions does it prompt? What other information does it make me think I want? So that then you can really design a very thoughtful plan of how do I move going forward with really the least amount of investment and time, because we know everyone's time and energy is very precious in terms of resources. So what's the easiest way to just get the ball rolling?
And Nelson, anything you would add to that?
I guess it sounds simple, but start collecting information. There's a lot of people that, well, I don't have that information, or we haven't ever, funeral service is moving much more quickly than it ever did before. And just, honestly, we could have been tracking last year's information and now tracking this year's information, and you're going to see, dramatic changes. And we see that for firms month to month, quarter by quarter. Just start. If you haven't done it before, don't feel bad about it. Don't beat yourself up. Just start. And then the other thing would be is, you can't collect everything either. You get mired into, well, we're going to track this and we're going to track that. Be double thinking everything that you're going to collect. And that's where make a free pitch there. We do that. I mean, we provide 1 hour free counseling. A lot of people will ask just that, I'm trying to figure out this, what should I be looking at? feel free to call up Johnson Consulting, tell them or tell me or any one of the consultants what it is that you're trying to figure out, and we can help you with the metrics that you should be looking at. But yeah, just start.
Well, great. So just to summarize, we've come close to the end of our presentation. And so just to summarize what people could do today, it sounds like people need to create a plan and look at what existing technology they already have, what they're already tracking, what they're not tracking, and maybe what they'd like to track, but don't overwhelm yourself, because you could track everything in theory, and it's not worth it if you can't get the quality to have the quantity. So just start with where you are today and answer some questions and create a plan, because using data, it's very deliberate and intentional, which will help you be more deliberate and intentional in the future. So I don't know if anybody had any additional questions. You can type them in if you do. I don't see any. All right, I think that's it, unless the panelists wanted to add anything else.
Well, I think Ashlee made a really good point when she was talking before about, when you're tracking things like case type, boy, cremation seems like it's gone up. Sometimes just the raw numbers don't tell you the whole story. Comparisons and percentages of change and things like that is really the storyline. Talk about baseline metrics, and that a 10% increase is not a 10% increase if you're dealing with a different baseline. It might have been a 20% change, and that's what you're looking at is the trend analysis, and to understand that. I've talked with clients, and we've talked about their businesses, and they're saying, oh, we're really consistent. We're doing 300 calls a year. We've done that for the last 5 years. And then we do the research from the Census Bureau and the local Register of Deeds, and finds out that, yeah, they've done consistently 300 calls for the last 5 years, but the local area has increased 10% in death call volume. So, you feel very confident in that your line is going straight along, no problems. But what you realize after you have all of the data is that you're missing out on all the increased market share. So you're, sometimes when you're standing still, you're going backwards. So.
Absolutely.
Point.
Well, Maddie, I think we're good. I don't think we have anything additional from the panelists or any questions, it looks like.
All right, awesome. I'm just gonna go and share my screen here. If it can go in the right mode for me. Oop. Sorry about that, guys. Technical difficulties. All right. Let's see here. Oh, goodness.
We can't even break for the weather report.
You can do a little song and dance now, Nelson.
Yeah, don't get me started.
Sorry about those guys. Hang on. Don't worry, it's gonna work. All right. Let's see here. Sorry, guys. Hang on. I promise it's gonna work.
Maybe to take the pressure off Maddie there, for anybody that's listening, this is all being recorded in case there's members of your team or your leadership group that you'd like to share some of this with them. You can also reach out and get a free link to watch it all over again.
Yeah, I think Maddie's going to send that out within 24 to 48 hours after the webinar. Everyone who's registered will get a link to the recording.
Yep, sorry about that, guys. My presentation isn't popping up here. I was going to have the slide show up of everybody's contact information. I'll just include that in the email. But yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Beth. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, everybody, for attending today. We hope you found the information shared today very helpful. And if you would like to rewatch it, like Beth was saying, we're going to send out within the next 24 to 48 hours all the information in an email, as well as a link to the webinar. So once again, if you have any questions, I'll make sure to include those slides in that email that has the appropriate contact information for the panelists today. So thank you guys once again, and have a great rest of your day.